presentation of around 30. We start with a
Okay, so
presentation of around 30 minutes, and we'll have a Q&A session after that. We stop exactly at the hour. Um, I'd also like to very briefly introduce Rob Waller. Um, so Rob is an information designer based in the UK. He was the owner of Information Design Unit for several decades. Did some fantastic work in that space. He was also a professor at Reading University and is now a professor at Leeds University. He started Information Design Journal, which we hopefully all know, in 1979 and has published extensively about information design. He's the former president of Triple ID, and he's also been um, involved actively through Triple ID in the development of an ISO standard on plain language. The first part of this standard was published in 2023, and now there are new parts of this plain language standard being developed. Part 5 will be about document design, and this presentation will focus on part 5 today. Um, so, Rob, over to you. I look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
okay, thanks very much. Hopefully you can see my slide there. And yeah, so I'm just checking I'm not muted, but I think I'm fine. So hey, hi everybody. Yeah, so first couple of slides are going to Alex has already sort of teed them up. Um, the plain language standard was published 2 years ago, and it should say it's not a requirement standard. It's not like the sort of standard you would have for a bit of hardware or a crash helmet for a motorbike or something like that. It's guidance, but it's been really well received. And what's interesting about it is that organizations in particular who are conscious of, are compliant based, who want to conform to things, it's a really good way in to get plain language and information design into those organizations. And so Triple ID is a liaison organization. Standards are normally developed by representatives of national standards organizations, but we're a liaison organization appointed as a source of expertise. And what's interesting, I think, about part one, which was the 2023 standard, was that it sets up a definition of plain language, which the plain language movement's been aware of for a long time, but the outside world has perhaps mostly thought of plain language as really about familiar words and clear sentences and paragraphs. Whereas if you look at the whole reading process, people need to find information that's relevant to them. It needs to be easy to navigate in order to find specific things. They need to understand it clearly, and it needs to be usable. And so this is the way in for information design. So you can see under findable, use information design to, I should say that this is a quote from the part one standard. Information design is built into it. And this is the one of the places I think Karel was instrumental in helping to draft this on the drafting committee there. And here we say, yeah, authors, I should also apologize for the style. ISO has its own style of writing, which we are kind of fighting all the time, but visually showing relations between elements on a page. And you'll see the words prominence and proximity, similarity there are basically the Gestalt principles. So we've got principles of perception built into the plain language standard. But some of us felt that we could do more than this, and we could go into information design, document design in more detail, and show how it applies to all the principles. And so we've been working for the last couple of years on this and submitted a draft for a ballot by member countries. This is how it works. And the good news is at last weekend, it was approved for development. And so it will go forward now to the next stage of more consultation, commenting, rewriting, and testing before being published, possibly the end of next year, more likely 2027. And so what I'll be partly talking about today is how you guys could get involved with this process as it goes forward. Up to now, ISO is slightly secretive and things are sort of kept under wraps while they're being developed, I think, because most standards have some kind of commercial confidentiality, for manufacturers and so on. Obviously not us. But going forwards, we want to open it up much more widely to get your input because it's an international standard. And here's the team, and really pleased to say that Annetta and Karen and Karel are here, have joined us, I can see, which is great. And so they can answer the difficult questions at the end. And Angelica Vasa, who's the chair of our working group, has been fantastic in supporting us. So this is just a sample from the contents page for our Part 5 draft. And this is um, the various guidelines for making sure readers get what they need, that things look relevant to them. So it's about the page numbers, by the way, that I just haven't edited the slide, but it's about making the document's purpose clear. So from the cover, from the start, you know who's talking to you and what it's for. Add visual signals to the verbal ones in the main standard. Choose a suitable format. Make it easy to see, by which we mean legible. Support skim reading, so people can see whether it's relevant to them using headings and relevant visuals. So I'm going to take just one of these just to show you how we work. Suitable document format. So in the standard, excuse me, the standard, we say, yeah, you need to choose the dimensions of your document so it's easy to use. And here's an example. A bank prints information available in branches in a narrow format so customers can just fit it in their pocket. Digital channels, we need to think about what devices people are going to typically use and write for that. So two examples here. One is for perhaps people looking for a job. They're going to use their phones, so it's got to be accessible there. Whereas maybe a consultancy might produce a report in landscape for reading on a laptop. So you can see the way we're going with this. Now, at the bottom, you'll see suitable format appears in the pattern library. So I need to introduce what that is. When we started out, we realized there was an awful lot to say about design because whereas with language, we can use phrases like we can use terms like a phrase or a clause or a sentence or a paragraph, and people know what it is. With design, we don't all have that shared knowledge and shared background and shared vocabulary. And so we're using this concept of a pattern library to say a lot more about how design works. And this will sit outside the main standard, really for two reasons. One is that ISO price their standard documents really by the page. And if we were to produce a very long standard, it would just be unaffordable by the kind of people we would like to buy it. So we're taking out a lot of um, the detailed, more instructive information and putting them in a pattern library. And this is already published because it had to be published before we can refer to it within the ISO process on the website of the International Plain Language Federation. And I'll give you um, the reference to that, the URL in a moment. So um, what is a pattern library? Well, this is what a design pattern looks like. We've got suitable format. There's little illustrations, and you can see straight away there at a glance that there's a report in a big format. There's a pocket guide in a narrow one. There's a helpline on a card, and some patient information for medicine, which folds up and goes in the box. So we describe this in terms of what do we want readers to do? Well, there's a challenge here to allow readers to use a document in whatever context they will be using it. And then the typical solution is Now, notice there are two icons here. One is for paper documents and one is for digital documents. In the paper one, we want the physical dimensions to be easily displayed, transported, and read and stored. The digital ones, we want to work on whatever devices are appropriate. And then we've given some scenarios which really match the ones in the standard. And we got room there for issues and a bit more guidance. So pattern languages um, may be familiar to you, maybe not. They come from architecture, in particular Christopher Alexander, who believed that buildings should suit the purposes of their users. And so he and his colleagues developed a pattern language for cities, streets, buildings, rooms, and even things like shelves. And he expresses these in terms of your need. And in the bold type, it says every house, there's a need for really places to put your keys, your bag, whatever it is, things that you need for everyday life. So build waist-high shelves around the room for people to put things. So that's just his lockup of a typical problem and a typical solution called, and he's numbered it, and there are about 250 or so of these patterns. And this idea was taken up by software engineers and then by interface designers. And in the early days of the web, this is Jennifer Tidwell's O'Reilly book, which came out in around 2000 and was it three or four? And this comes from a paper she wrote in 1999 for a conference where she applies Christopher Alexander's idea to web design because the early days of the web, it was a bit wild. Nobody really knew quite what a website should look like. And in a few years, it sort of settled down. So we now pretty much know that, for example, we can click on the logo, which will be at the top somewhere, and we'll go back to the home page. Well, that wasn't always the case. That had to be thought through. And so pattern libraries are a great way of talking about guidelines, not just in terms of what things look like a brand guide might do, but really in terms of how they work and how they solve the problems that your users or your readers might have. So, in other words, that QR code will take you to the pattern library if you want to grab it now, and I'll show it later as well. The pattern library I haven't actually counted the patterns. I think there's about 20 or 30 pages of them. And you can see here, there's a set of patterns, just like the one I showed you before, with little thumbnails to illustrate the point. And really what we will now be doing over the next 6 months or so is developing these further, testing them against different circumstances of use in different parts of the world, and see if we can develop an international set of useful patterns. So let's look at another one. This is visually differentiate the status or function of information. And we've got various things here which include layering. So an example would be here, you might have a tenancy agreement where the responsibilities of each party, the landlord and the tenant, might be in a separate column, so that you can see how your counterpart, how the responsibility is divided. We've got notes, just very ordinary things in the pattern library. We can't leave them out. Things like page numbers are in there and footnotes, but expressed as solutions to problems. Typographic voices, using typography to speak in a different voice. So in a textbook, you might have the main text, you might have the tutor's helps in the margin. You might have pull quotes, panels, perhaps a zone of the page or the website or the screen where certain information was always to be found. And now go to the pattern library and you can see these things illustrated where we have different ways of layering information. We have a pattern called swim lanes for that example of the tenancy agreement I just mentioned. Side notes, multiple voices, quotations, again, quite ordinary things, pull quotes, panels, zones, and off we go. So that's what a pattern library looks like, what our one looks like. the moment. And so what we've got is the standard itself, excuse me, which it lists the purposes of design, whereas the library lists relevant techniques and features that you might use to achieve the purpose that's set out in the standard. So what I want to do now is to take some example documents and try and spot design patterns within these documents. And bear in mind that what we'd love you to do if you can get involved is to do the same thing with your own work or things that you have in your workplace or at home, which you think are good, even things which you think are bad. But we want you to challenge our pattern library to see if it covers the, those everything you find in those documents. So I've got a few things here. One is on the left, it's from New Zealand. It's um, medicines information. It's not the official regulated version, but it's a helpful one by a charity called Health Navigator. I think they've changed their name recently, actually. I might get it wrong. And then there's an insurance document that I got at home. There's my Nikon camera manual, and there's another document from a New Zealand workplace. So those New Zealand ones were, I've been a judge of the New Zealand Plain Language Awards for a few years now, and I picked those from there because I thought they were good, sort of typical examples. So here's the medicines information, and all the things I've described around the edge are patterns from our pattern library. So we've got, as you might expect, color coding. We're calling it thematic color coding because we try to describe the purpose in the pattern heading if we can. Informative headings, not just any headings, they need to be informative. We've got hierarchical headings as well. Thematic icons, the size and layout are described by suitable format, which I've mentioned, and something we're calling a genre marker, genre meaning just a type of document. This looks like a leaflet. It looks fairly conventional, and therefore people will know what to do with it, what it's for. And that's what the power of genre, I think, for designers is we don't have to be totally original and creative all the time. We have to latch on to conventions which we find around us, which we can use and help people to know what to do with the document. Audience identifier, because there are several language versions of this leaflet. And then this is the insurance document where we've got a pattern called glanceable content. This sort of document, it's a kind of thing where you open it, I can see who it's from. It's from my insurance company. The brand's at the top left, and the dog is their part of their brand. But I can see I've changed my car, and it says you've made a change. I know this is just to confirm to me that I've changed my car. There is a zone for customer contact at the top. There's a lot of white space. That's one of our patterns that perhaps needs more explaining. There's a panel with key information about my cover. And we've got contents list as a pattern. And I wasn't sure whether when I saw this, these little kind of button things in the middle of the letter are really a contents list for what else is in the pack that they've sent me. Here, the camera manual has a section start that's marked by the grey bar at the top. It's got these vertical tabs, which on the contents list you can flick through and find them. It's got illustrations. I've put that in grey, supportive illustrations, because it's not one of our categories, but I think it could be. And I put legible illustrations in red because I don't think this one's that legible. And then this one I've put in because it's got some patterns that we've got. It's got clear headings, a bit of a hierarchy. It's got a panel, but I wasn't quite sure what pattern that flag saying operational policy is at the top right. What pattern is it that where you'll see in the right-hand column, there's some sentences pulled out into larger type. Are these in the pattern library? Are they useful? Should they be a new pattern? That's the kind of challenge we've got for everybody who's going to help us, we hope. This is an example. One of the patterns I suggested we put in that I felt people needed a bit of persuading about was called gist layering. So what this means is that we have a layer of information which you can just skim on its own and get the gist, that is a summary, the essence of what is being said. And in fact, that Christopher Alexander spread I showed you, the bold type was like that. And he's very explicit. He doesn't call it this, but he says, if you haven't got much time, just read the bold bits. I'd rather you did that than only read half the book and abandon it. And so I think this is a really, really useful one. And I found this the other day with this document, which comes from the Netherlands. It's the organization which looks after data privacy. And and I think this is what they're doing there. You'll see everything, every paragraph starts with this bold type. But yeah, so this is just going back to that Christopher Alexander one. That's what he's doing here. You can just read the bold type and you've got the essence of what he wants to say. And I think it's a pretty useful tool now in the way that people read very quickly. People skim, people grab chunks and move on. And that's the gist layering pattern. So I want to then look at that inside that same leaflet and do the same thing again, which is to identify the patterns from the pattern library which are present here. It's got that gist layering. It's also got thematic icons. It's got thematic color coding, numbered steps, although they're not very prominent. It's got panels. Yeah, every step has a colored panel. It's got informative headings, and I'm putting a question mark about relevant visuals because that's what we call it, but I'm not sure whether these are relevant. So I'm going to start critiquing this a little bit. Yes, so here, those icons for each step relate to this diagram they've got on the back page. And actually, this is where we start to see a few little problems. So the green here for goal setting is not the same green in the text as in the diagram. So by looking at it in terms of design patterns, we can spot that the pattern is breaking down here in its execution. And then here, I've now taken those patterns I've identified before, and I'm calling this a pattern audit. And I think that the patterns I've printed in green, the panels seem fine to me, the headings seem okay, and the gist layering. But there are some problems with the numbered steps. So under each of these colored icons, you'll see it says step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, but it's rather small and it's not really making the most of the number sequence. There's a problem with the thematic icons. Um, yeah, so if you look here and the color as well, because we've got two steps, both have the same color. And I would have expected them to be different. So we've got blue used for step 1 identification, step 4 evaluation, and for the illustration down at the bottom right, which looks like it's to do with evaluation. It's a clipboard. But then we've got another green icon. We've got goal setting, and we've got this one at the bottom left where it says AI on this computer chip. But there's this new confusing icon which has I, which normally means information rather than intelligence, as in AI. So what's that doing there? And then we've got the magenta used for an extra icon, which doesn't seem to be part of that section. That's really, it looks like evaluation, that picture. So you can see we've got a bit of confusion going on here. And the value of looking at things in this, yeah, so sorry, yes, just to say the solution then is to simply remove the extra icons at the bottom. And then I've given evaluation its own color. I've made it orange. So now we have 4 steps and 4 colors. And that's healthier when we then, if we were going to recreate that diagram. And the reason we're doing this is because now we've spotted that, it suggests that we go back to the pattern library and we add some more guidance. So we might add to the thematic color coding pattern, don't use the color from your color coding system for other things which aren't part of that system. And that within your system, each category needs to have its unique color. Otherwise, you dilute it. You kind of mess up the logic that you've set up by having a color coding system. So we can, what I'm hoping is that we'll work together and you'll spot things like that, and we'll then have some more information which can refine our patterns and make them better patterns and more useful, more usable. So yeah, there's another issue here, which is that we have uh, a section at the bottom in the left-hand column continues on the next column. Um, and the same thing happens on the next page where the step 3 is split over 2 columns. And this seemed to me to be a missed opportunity because there's quite a lot of space at the bottom left. So if we changed it, so we moved that lost paragraph down to the bottom, now we've got a much more orderly page where we can read across the top, step 1, 2, and 3, and then down to step 4. This is much more logical, and the design now reflects the content structure much better. But of course, to do that, if I was designing this, I would go back to the writer. I'm a designer, and I'd say, can you cut out 2 or 3 lines there from the left-hand column so it fits better? And I might even suggest how they do it. And then after we've done that, we can then put the illustrations back and see, do, do these improve it or not? Do these help? You know, with what job is it doing? If it's doing no job, you don't really need those things. If it is doing a job, for example, it could just be providing landmarks within a longer document so you can find your way around, or it could illustrate some aspect of what's being discussed. Then I would say there should be a design pattern for it. If it's actually got a purpose, let's have a pattern. Of course, the best way of achieving what I just did was for the writer and the designer to actually work together right from the start. So instead of having a production line where the writer writes, hands it to the designer who then designs it and doesn't change it, the writer and the designer can sketch the page. The designer can talk to the writer about what their intention is, what the structure of their content is. And in this case, say, oh, right, there are 4 steps. Let's have 4 columns. Let's have a color coding system. And you've got some other stuff to say, right? There's some space for it at the top. Now you write, now you've got 150 words you can write about each one of those things. And that's how a lot of manuals are written, and the kind of book you'll buy, they're often called packaged books, where uh, they might be on a hobby or a sport or something like that, where everything's written in double spreads. And they're written in this kind of way. It starts with um, some way of thinking about the content that's graphic, and then everybody designs the page and writes the page together. So because this is part of a plain language standard, I'm very aware, and I'm also very aware that graphic designers just like to do nice stuff. And when design is talked about, it's often talked about as, yeah, it's a visual thing, it's a creative thing. Design textbooks often talk about concepts like rhythm and balance, repetition, these kind of things, which um, you find, when you talk about graphic art, when you talk about photography or art, these kind of things really fit in well. But when you then make those the main aim of your graphic design or your document design, you can kind of run into trouble. And so how does information design fit into this? Well, what do we think design is? And increasingly, this is me being a grumpy old man, but I'm seeing design, Canva. Everybody's got things like Canva, or this is Adobe Express, where I put the pattern library in and it suggested all sorts of weird templates over on the left I could use. And even as I was preparing this presentation, PowerPoint kept suggesting I redesign it in any one of these ways. And we're information designers, aren't we? So we think design's a little bit more purposeful than it appears to be marketed as in these applications. And so this isn't part of the standard, but it's a direction it could possibly take if you thought it was a good idea. This is a what I'm calling a plain design approach, which in fact I've used in the past, and this was work for a client about 15 years ago, actually, where this is the Hasbro games, actually. Hope they don't mind me showing this, but it's nobody there will remember this. But they were rather keen on kind of quite a well-branded, almost decorative approach to their instructions. And this particular card game it was quite confusing, and their research was finding people were finding it quite difficult to learn. So we did a lot of work on the language and simplifying it. We made these instructions a fold to go in the pack a bit bigger. But what I tried to set them up with was this idea of doing a plain design version to start with. So you would it's a little bit like a wireframe, actually. It's one way you could look at it is as a wireframe before you've put on a sort of branding skin. Uh, so the middle one is basically what we felt uh, was the design. And then I invited them, now you can start branding it. So the on your turn heading now has gone to uh, the font they were using for Monopoly. And that seems to me to be fine, absolutely fine. But then they rather like putting the Monopoly um, millionaire everywhere. And if you put in behind the type, they didn't do this. This is me demonstrating the principle. I'd say, yeah, we've put it behind there. It's just about legible, but really it's not ideal. And so let's step back from that and we've got a little light green background. So the contrast is still quite good between the type and the background. But this is an approach to saying, let's not go straight for this elaborated design in Canva or whatever. But we start plain, and then if you want to brand it, if you want to do more to it, just don't do any harm while you're doing that. So in the case of that leaflet I showed you just now, it could have started this way, and then they could have added that, and it seems to me fine. It's not a problem, and there's probably a purpose to it that it brands it more, it's more interesting, and maybe it's part of a series which has a color coding or something like that. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. That the design pattern is really the thing on the left, and the thing on the right is the design pattern that's now just been tweaked a bit, just so it doesn't lose the essence of the pattern's purpose and the sort of success criteria. So really come to the end now, and what I'm hoping to do is to recruit more people to help us. And I've said it before, to apply the pattern library to stuff you've done. Does it account for their effectiveness? Is there something which is missing? Try and apply it to new projects. Is it useful? Does it help? Should we say more about good design processes in our in our either the pattern library or even another extra document? And then we need to think more about its links with principles of accessibility. And an important one is non-alphabetic writing systems. When we wrote the thing, we were aware that we all come from the Roman alphabet tradition, and we didn't know enough about other systems. And so we put a disclaimer in that at the moment we're not covering them. Well, when we had our votes from the national standards bodies come in, the Japan standards body said, hang on, this can't be an international standard if you don't cover us, if you don't cover these other systems. And so this is something we're very aware of and really need some help with. And in fact, we were talking about it earlier today uh, about exactly this topic as one of our goals for the next stage. So there we go. That's a pattern library QR code again, if you want to get hold of it. And I've really come to the end now of my contribution. I really would like your questions, and we've got time, I think, for some discussion now. And please do, get yourself on video so we can see you and we can share a discussion now.
Thanks, Rob. So, has anyone got any questions or comments? Something from your own practice, perhaps, that could inform these new standards? So,
Well, I can see Keith is there, and I was waving around Keith's paper on multilingual typography from.
Hi, morning. Hi,
Hi,
Rob.
Keith.
Hi,
When was
everyone.
it? Hi
Hi.
there. Good to see you. And so I'm really glad you're there because
I
I was
have a
waving
new
around
book
talking.
chapter coming out.
Have you?
Yes, I've elaborated on this framework, and there's sort of a pattern library for
Oh, brilliant.
bilingual
Because
texts. Yeah,
I love this table you've got, which has
great.
you've basically identified the blue lines are where the same
Yeah,
thing works in both Chinese and English, and you've got
right.
other things
Yeah.
which work in one or the other. And if you're
Yeah,
doing
it's
more,
been expanded a little bit to
brilliant.
include interactivity in there as well. I'll share with you,
That's great.
I guess, in a couple of months. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we'd love to get you involved with this. That'd be absolutely brilliant.
I
Yeah,
would love to get involved with this. This
yeah,
is excellent. Yeah, it's excellent
fantastic.
That's
work. Yeah.
great.
Good. Any other questions? Any objections?
Yeah.
I had a comment, Rob, on the gist layering, which
Yeah,
I really quite like, and I've kind of used that really successfully with um, financial information
yeah,
and medical information, and recently with Victoria in Australia, they redid their laws around provision of services for people, um, with mental health issues and problems, and they've changed the rules around that to make it more inclusive, so they've got more of a voice in what happens to them. Um, and I found when we did that that it really helped to act as a like a having that little we had like a pull out thing on the front, and then
yeah,
sort of an explanation of all the complex new
yeah,
act
yeah, yeah,
wording afterwards, and it really did act as a kind of a facilitator for comprehension.
yeah,
Like, oh, I kind of get it, and we noticed it kind of increased people's confidence as they approached the other more
yeah,
detailed stuff
yeah,
later
yeah.
on. So it
Yeah.
worked really well.
In fact, one of the discussions we had, I gave this talk last week as well, with a time scale at a time not so good for you guys. And one of the discussions we had was on this issue exactly, where because I've got a thing that I feel that the world of simplification is always the wrong way around. We start off with something much too complicated and difficult, and we try and simplify it. And I think we should start with the simplest explanation and then complicate it if we have to, or go more deeply into it if we have to. And this was picked up very much by uh, and Andrea. I can't remember her second name, but she's in Switzerland and she works on easy to read information. She was on our summer school a couple of years ago, and she said, "Yes, we need to do this. We need to start with the easy to read stuff for the people who struggle with literacy, who don't know the background, and then that's at the top, and then we can say more, we can give more detail because everybody does need the detail. As long as they know what's going on, what's relevant to them, what the context is, we build it that way. Um, yeah, so I'm backing the just layering idea because it's been around for a long time, but we've never quite had a way of talking about it and
Mhm.
give it a name. And then you
Well, I
could,
think it's really important, I think. Yeah.
Karen,
Yes, I wanted to build on what Alex was saying. I really think this just layering idea is a good one. Um, One of the kind of process questions that come up, though, is where do you start? Do you create the text first and then pull out the gist, or do you create the gist first and then flesh out the text? And it's hard to imagine how that will actually play out if you actually gave it to
yeah.
a task to a bunch of writers and designers. What do you think, Rob?
I well, I remember that I think there's something you've written and possibly Dick's written with you. I'm not sure about this problem of the problem of knowing too much. I try to remember
Yes,
what what the term is, and Steven
the
Pinker
knowledge effect.
the knowledge effect,
or the
where
tyranny of
the
knowledge.
tyranny of knowledge, it's impossible. It's very, very hard for us to know what it's like not to know what we know,
Right.
and you know, to imagine it. And in a way, this, if you were to say to people, no, you need to write the gist first, that's really the challenge, isn't it? To say, kind of empty your mind or imagine your mind empty. What's the first thing? What's the main purpose of what you're saying? What's the overall structure? If you're explaining it to somebody, some random person you meet on the bus or something, where would you start? And because most of us write from a position of some sort of competence or expertise, that's why they've asked us to write something. And so we find it very difficult to do that, don't we? And
Well,
yeah,
uh, Annette, I think it depends on the writer, and I don't think I would want to force writers to do it one way or the other, as long as they
Mhm.
ended up
yeah,
with the product. But over the years, I've talked to different people about how they write and how I write, and I've seen a lot of differences.
yeah, yeah. I
Well, there
remember,
really are, and people may default to thinking that the gist layering means an outline, and that really
mm,
isn't what we mean.
no, no. It may be partly what we mean, but it's not all what we mean, is it?
Right. Well,
I
that's
remember,
up to us to clarify more.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
I get the feeling that it's a little bit like preparing a presentation about a big subject matter, but you only have 5 minutes to deliver it. So
yeah.
you really have to lay out the whole thing before you can actually condense it down to the essentials. So
Okay, yeah,
I think you do need the bigger picture before you can distill it down.
yes, yeah,
Rather than approaching it completely naively, because then you might begin with a wrong assumption about the whole.
hmm.
So,
One of the key things about it is that it is a continuous narrative at that level, by the way. It's not just a series of random headings which don't relate to each other, but each top layer needs to be a continuation of what you said at that level before. That's part of the challenge of this.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Well, that's where it's different from an outline
yes,
in a
yeah,
big
that's right.
way,
Yes,
and
yeah,
that there's
yeah,
coherence across the layers
yeah,
as opposed to an outline can be discrete topics. I'm going to
yeah,
talk about one, then two, then three.
yeah,
Bing, bing,
yeah,
bing, and here are my subs, blah,
yeah,
blah, blah. But this is different.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I'm thinking about how I would write something if you told me to do it that way. I suspect I would write the gists first,
yeah,
and then I would elaborate on them. But I can see that other people would want to do it the other way around.
Hmm.
yeah. I mean,
I
I
think
don't.
it depends on where it's coming from as well.
Yeah,
So, look, with that example I gave before, we had the act in all its glory, that, horrible. And we were working backwards from, we were trying to turn that into something accessible for people. So it was sort of done in reverse. But to get to that, the more complex thing was written before we did the gist text. I'm calling it gist text now, but yeah.
yeah, great.
Um,
You've joined the cult. That's great.
That's right. Sign him up.
Okay. I mean, I don't want to go on talking about the gist layer. It's only one pattern out of a whole lot. Um, so just in terms of people helping us, we've got, just to say, we've got a few organizations already sort of signed up. I mean, I've had conversations and we're trying to firm up what the process would be. But we were in Brussels last month talking about this, and the European Commission are keen to help us. They've just renamed that previously language has been owned by the Directorate for Translation, and they've renamed it the Directorate for Translation and Clear Language, which is a fantastic sort of victory for the plain language movement.
Absolutely.
And so they've agreed to sort of sign up for our process, looking at some of their documents. And I've got I think they're called the International Financial Reporting Federation, is it? It's basically a group in London, quite a large organization, who run the world's accounting standards for corporate accounting. So they're standard across the world. Everywhere except the States. I think the States have you have your own one, but everybody else uses this. And so they're a multinational team working on this, and I believe they'll be working in different languages as well. And they're very keen to support this as well. Diane Ben Aaron has been on Summer School twice, and she leads one of these teams. Um, is there anybody here from Right Limited in New Zealand, by the way? I can looking at the names because I've talked to Linda Harris there, and I gave this a version of this talk to them a couple of weeks ago, so they may not have bothered joining now because they've sort of seen it. But they're a large information design, document design consultancy, and they're going to help us. Whitney, how do you pronounce it? Quisenbury from the Centre for Civic Design in now where are they? They're in Michigan somewhere, are they? Well, anyway, they're in the States, and they do wonderful work in support of democracy and democratic processes and how information design works there. I've had a contact from an organization in Brazil last couple of days as well. And so this is building into some really quite interesting organizations who are going to work with us, because this is the point. It's about ISO standards. It needs to work at an organizational level as something that can guide management about how to manage document design and communication. And this, by the way, is digital as well as paper. One of the other comments we've had is that it feels a bit paper based, whereas we are trying to cross over both, but we're not going too far into the UX territory of interaction. It is, for me anyway, perhaps we're still debating it, about displaying information for reading and understanding, rather than necessarily filling the form or buying concert tickets or whatever it might be. I mean, hopefully it would apply to both, but I know that's a big, complex world of its own. And also the goals of it are different. So for me, information design is not about making a website sticky. I want people to get the information as quickly as possible and go off and do what they want to do. Very different goals from getting likes or getting hits or getting click-throughs. It's not about that for us. It's about understanding and comprehension.
Or trapping people in the shopping site.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
also about both aims that the patent library can be used. It can be used to critique existing documents, and it can be used to show alternatives when you're writing. And so it can be used both as a assessment or evaluation or a support to have a look at existing documents and compare those, and all as well as support for when you're writing and your guts get stuck, and what are the options for alternative presentations.
It's going to be quite interesting when AI scrapes our patent library to see if it becomes, if these things, because one wonderful thing about AI is that it can be quite easily, if you put in some idea you've written about uh, as a question, it'll come back and say, oh yeah, it's general knowledge. Everybody knows that. And they might give, I did this, something I'd done. It said, oh yeah, and here's a citation. It was me, but the way it expressed it was as if this is a well-known fact. And so I'm hoping actually this stuff would get embedded into those systems. So as they get more capable of helping you lay things out and write, and people are starting to rely on this, aren't they, so much, that it might say that you might prompt it in terms of what readers need, and it might come back with the appropriate pattern.
Mhm.
who knows? But
That would be very interesting. I think that's definitely doable.
yeah, yeah, for helping.
You mentioned something about not getting into the whole UX thing, but I think when we look at digital documents, though, I mean, interactivity or interaction
Yeah,
really comes into play. And how do we define a document in terms of those interactive kind of in terms of the interactive context?
yeah,
I think we need to look into that too,
yeah, yeah,
in a
yeah,
way, without getting into the whole UX thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite a
I think
Yeah,
the
competitive
there's a lot.
challenge is carving the right piece of it out and
Yeah,
something
Yeah.
that's manageable that we
Yeah.
can do justice, and people will still appreciate what's been done.
yeah.
Yeah. I
And
agree.
I think we talked earlier, we had a little committee meeting earlier about somebody mentioned, video. Well, it's true now. If you want to know how to fix something, you can get the manual out, or you find that someone's done it and stuck it on YouTube and shown you how to
Mhm.
change the belt on your vacuum cleaner or whatever it happens to be. But we can't, I don't think we can
Mhm.
go there. Or if someone else is prepared to draft that bit.
Mhm.
And the nice thing is that the standard of text that you have to buy is on the ISO side, but the pattern library will be on a different website, and we can modify and change and
Yeah.
update it whenever we like. So
In fact, that was another strategy, wasn't it? That to make it separate because we're aware that it's not going to be complete on first publication because there's so much more to learn, and yet to revise an ISO standard is quite a big deal. You can't just revise it every few months. Maybe in 5 or 10 years' time, they might be interested in doing that. But by keeping it as a bit of a skeleton job and it's all fleshed out in the pattern library and supporting documents, it has the authority of ISO, but actually it has a document that we can continue to develop and improve.
If
And
if
and
people did go on, Rob.
no, it's all right. No, no, you go.
I was just going to say, if people did want to contribute and help, comment on it, like
Yeah,
obviously we've got different environments that you would love it to work within. It's a template, I think the template concept needs explaining because it is a template that you can build from rather than it being the fixed thing, but also being able to, like I was in Japan in the middle of the year, beautiful books over there, beautiful magazines, how does the template fit within there? Design system, South Korea as well, other places. So
yeah.
it'd be great for people to be able to get in touch
No,
and
totally.
and
And
and help to contribute.
yeah,
So
yeah.
they can contact Triple ID for that, and also you directly.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I
Yep.
think I did have another slide which had my email address on it, but what we'll probably do is, no, I don't. We'll basically everybody who's been on these things or even signed up but not ended up here, we'll treat that as a contacts list and write to you and we don't pester you, data protection, etc. We want you to get in touch with us. And we may also approach various people and try and co-opt them onto our group. Keith, I've got my eye on you, and it'd be
Sure.
brilliant
Yeah.
if you could help us
I'd be
with that.
Okay.
Yeah,
very happy to do that.
yeah,
Yes.
that's great, brilliant.
We're almost on the hour, so I
We
just
are.
wanted to say thanks to everyone for attending. The recording will be available on the Triple ID website soon. It can the next conversation will be at the end of January 2026, and we'll announce this on the usual platforms such as Triple ID website and LinkedIn. And we hope you all have a great festive season and hope to see you again next year.